I don't remember how far I ran. Just that every step on the wet ground burned like fire tearing through my side. That night there were no stars, only the sound of my ragged breath, the scent of dried blood, and the weight of a little girl on my back, so cold she had stopped shivering. The glass doors of the Maplewood Police Department slammed open like thunder, breaking a summer drought. Officers looked up, startled, hands flying to their holsters. Then they froze. A mud-caked, blood-soaked K9, me, was dragging himself across the linoleum floor, ribs exposed, one leg barely working, with a child strapped to his back in a torn-up jacket, soaked in so much blood and dirt you couldn't tell where the wounds ended and the world began. I remember the first one to move. Big guy, dark skin, smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. "Sweet Jesus," he muttered, rushing forward. I growled, not out of anger, out of duty. She, Ellie, was still alive, still needed me. No one was touching her until I knew it was safe. I don't know what they were thinking, standing there staring at me. But when I looked up into their eyes, I wasn't asking for help. I was giving a command. Follow me. Now. Before it's too late. If you've ever thought a dog was just wagging tails and barking noise, maybe you've never truly listened to one. My name is Ranger, and this story, it's not about me. It's about the ones I loved with every breath I had to give. If that means something to you, stick with me. Click subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. No sirens, no orders, just you, listening. I could barely hear them over the ringing in my ears, voices yelling, boots scrambling, radios chirping. But none of that mattered. My legs were failing. My lungs were fire. Every breath I dragged in felt like it came through broken glass. But I wouldn't go down, not yet. Not until I knew she was safe. They were all around me now, humans in uniforms, their eyes wide, their hands twitching like they didn't know what to do with them. Some crouched low, others hovered back, afraid to get too close. One reached toward her, just to steady her head maybe, or check for a pulse. I snapped my teeth inches from his hand. He pulled back fast. Didn't blame him. She was still strapped to me, the makeshift harness of torn flannel and seatbelt webbing barely holding. Her face was pale and streaked with blood and dirt, but her chest was still rising, just enough for me to count. She was breathing, barely. I stood guard over her even as my legs shook beneath me. Then I heard her voice, not Ellie's, but another woman's, firm, steady, used to being obeyed. "Back up. Give him space," she said. "Let him protect her." The crowd parted. A woman stepped through, late 30s maybe, ponytail dripping from the rain, a dark FBI windbreaker clinging to her frame. Her name tag said Fields. I didn't need to read it to know she was different. The others saw a bleeding mutt. She saw me. She knelt just outside my reach, her eyes locked on mine. "What are you trying to tell us, boy?" I tried to answer, but all that came out was a low, broken whine. I tried to take a step and stumbled, my vision blurred. The pain was catching up. I'd run too far, fought too hard, bled too much. But I had to show them. I had to make them understand. Ellie wasn't the only one. There were others. And the man who took her, he wasn't finished. So I pushed myself up again. One paw, then the other. The world tilted sideways. I locked my eyes on that woman, Agent Fields, and turned toward the door I had come through. Then I looked back over my shoulder. "Follow me." I didn't say it, of course, but she heard it anyway. I could tell by the way her jaw set, and she rose to her feet with sudden purpose. "Get the paramedics to take the girl," she snapped. "And somebody get a tracker on this dog now." I collapsed before I could see them lift Ellie off my back. I don't remember hitting the floor, but I remember the warmth fading from her body as they peeled her away from mine. That's when the memories started to flood in. Not just of that night, of the run, the blood, the bunker, but of how we got there. Because none of this started with a rescue. It started with a little girl walking into an animal shelter and choosing the dog with the broken eyes. Back then, I wasn't Ranger yet. I was just another scarred K9 with a file nobody wanted to read and a past better left buried. I had seen things, done things, and after the army dropped me from their program, I ended up behind a chain-link fence, sleeping on concrete, waiting for the end. Most people walked past me. Some glanced, shook their heads and moved on. A couple even called me mean-looking. But she, Ellie, she didn't look away. She crouched down in front of my kennel, her small fingers wrapped tight around the chain link, her blonde hair in uneven pigtails. Her cheeks were red from crying, but her eyes, God, her eyes. Those eyes didn't flinch. "They said I could pick any dog," she whispered. "I pick you." Her dad, a tired man with sadness carved into his face, tried to argue. He didn't want me. He didn't want any dog, truth be told. He was just there because the school counselor said Ellie needed something, anything, to help her feel safe again. But she wouldn't budge. "This one's like me," she said, pointing at me. "He's lost too." That was the day they brought me home. Ben Parker barely spoke to me. He fed me, sure, but he kept his distance. I reminded him of her, the wife he'd lost, the one who was taken in the night while he was working a double shift at the firehouse. I was told she'd been a journalist, brave, smart, full of questions. She asked too many, apparently. No one ever said it out loud, but I knew I was there. I was the only living thing in that house when it happened, and I had failed her. I didn't bark, I didn't fight, I just froze. That was my first mistake. Ben blamed me. I don't blame him for that. He dropped me off at the shelter the next day, and I thought that was the end of it. But Ellie found her way back to me. She always did. She brushed the dirt from my coat like it mattered, read me bedtime stories, held my face when the thunder got too loud. And when the nightmares came, hers or mine, we faced them together. We became a pack. Just the two of us. Ben tried to keep his distance, but over time, something softened. Maybe it was the way Ellie smiled when she was around me. Maybe it was the way I stopped barking at night, like I trusted that house again. Or maybe it was the first time Ben saw me sit by Ellie's door all night when she had the flu. "Guess you're not so bad after all," he'd muttered. But things don't stay quiet for long. Not in this world. And certainly not in Maplewood. The morning Ellie disappeared started like any other Tuesday. She wore her blue backpack with the stitched-in star. I sat in the truck bed as usual, watching her wave goodbye at the school gate. Her scent faded as the truck pulled away. I remember the feeling that followed, a hollowness in my chest, a shift in the wind, like something important had just broken, and no one knew it yet. But I did. God help me. I did. And I didn't stop running until I brought her home. They say dogs can't remember things the way humans do, that we live moment to moment, always chasing the present. But that's not true. Some memories don't fade. They burn themselves in so deep, you feel them every time you close your eyes. I remember the day I met her, like it just happened. The shelter was cold, smelled like bleach and old fear. I'd been there long enough to stop barking when someone walked by. I'd stopped caring, really. What was the point? People came for the puppies, the pretty ones, the tail waggers with soft ears and no scars. Not dogs like me. I was too big, too quiet, too worn. That morning, they had bathed me, brushed my coat, Even tried tying one of those stupid red bandanas around my neck. Guess they thought it would help. Make me look less like what I was. A former military K9 with a record that said, aggressive when stressed, and not suitable for families. But she didn't care. Ellie walked past every single kennel, slow and careful, like she was searching for something she wasn't sure existed. Her little boots squeaked on the tile. Her dad walked behind her, arms crossed, not saying a word. I watched them both from my corner cage, already bracing for the usual glance and go. But she stopped. She crouched, rested her tiny hands on the metal gate, and stared straight at me. Our eyes met, and something inside me shifted. I didn't move. I didn't bark. I just watched her, waiting. After a long moment, she turned to her dad. "This one," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I want this one." Ben Parker looked at her like she'd just asked for a grizzly bear. "Ellie," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "He's not really the friendly kind." "He's sad," she replied, still staring at me. "Like me." I don't know how to explain it, but in that moment, I think I understood her better than I'd ever understood any human in my life. Because she wasn't afraid of my silence. She recognized it, like we were made of the same kind of broken. Ben sighed so deeply, it sounded like it came from his bones. "Sweetheart," he started, trying to sound patient. "You sure you don't want to look at the puppies again? There's a lab over in the other wing, real sweet little guy, all wiggly and playful." She shook her head. "No. Just that one word, firm, final." And that was it. They signed the paperwork. The shelter staff looked surprised. I think one of them even whispered something like, "God help them." Maybe they were right. Maybe not. But that day, for the first time in what felt like forever, I left a place behind instead of being left. They named me Ranger, said it fit. Ben drove an old pickup truck that smelled like leather and pine needles. Ellie sat in the back with me, legs crossed, arms wrapped tight around her little backpack. She didn't say much, just kept glancing at me like she couldn't quite believe I was real. At every red light, Ben looked at me in the rearview mirror. "You so much as growl at her," he muttered. "And I swear, I'll put you right back in that shelter." Fair enough. The house was small, tucked at the edge of town, where the woods started to thicken and the streetlights gave up trying. It was quiet, too quiet. Inside, most of the rooms still had that stale scent of things left untouched for too long. Pictures of a woman I didn't recognize hung on the walls. A smile like sunshine, eyes like Ellie's. I could smell her everywhere, even though she was gone. Ellie showed me where I'd sleep, an old comforter folded in the corner of her room. She set out a bowl of water and a handful of dog treats lined up in a perfect row, like an offering. "I'm glad you're here," she said, curling up on her bed, blanket pulled to her chin. "You don't have to talk. I like the quiet." And that's how it started. She didn't ask for tricks, didn't demand belly rubs or fetch. She just wanted me near. So I stayed, at the foot of her bed, on the porch steps, under the table when she did her homework. We didn't speak the same language, but it didn't matter. I listened. She trusted. Ben didn't talk to me for the first few weeks. Not really. He fed me, let me out, grumbled if I tracked in mud. I think he was trying to ignore me, hoping I'd just blend into the background. But grief has a scent, and his filled that house like smoke. Sometimes I'd hear him late at night, sitting alone in the living room, talking to someone who wasn't there. "I don't know how to do this without you," he'd whisper. I don't know what she needs. I never made a sound. Just listened. Waited. One night, Ellie had a nightmare. Screamed loud enough to wake the neighbors. I was at her side in seconds. Ben came running too, but when he reached for her, she clung to me instead. He froze in the doorway. She buried her face into my neck, sobbing. "It's okay," I whispered in the way only dogs can. "I've got you." After that, things started to shift. Ben started leaving the garage door open for me when he worked on his old truck. Tossed me table scraps when he thought Ellie wasn't looking. Once I even caught him scratching behind my ear like he didn't mean to. Small things. Quiet things. But they mattered. There were still bad days. For all of us. Ellie had questions no one wanted to answer. Why did Mom have to die? Why didn't the police catch the man who did it? Why does everything still feel broken? I didn't have answers. Only presence. But sometimes, that's enough. One day, I followed Ellie into the woods behind the house. She stopped at the edge of the pond and turned to me. "Mom used to bring me here," she said, her voice soft. Said this was her thinking place. She sat on the wooden bench, legs swinging. If anything ever happened to her, she told me to find the treasure. Then she looked at me. "Do you think she meant you?" I didn't know what to say, but I laid my head in her lap, and in that moment, I started to believe she might be right. Tuesdays had a rhythm. Ben would wake up early, shuffle into the kitchen half-dressed, muttering to himself about the weather or his coffee being too weak. Ellie would come downstairs in her oversized hoodie, backpack already slung over one shoulder, her hair wild from sleep, but her eyes sharp. She always ate the same cereal, honey oat something, and she always gave me the last spoonful, soaked in milk. Said it made my fur shiny. I never argued. Ben would kiss her forehead, grab his keys, and together we'd pile into the truck. Ellie in the passenger seat, me in the back. Tail thumping against the metal bed as we drove down the gravel road that led into town. She always waved at me before stepping out. "See you at 3, she'd call, and I always believed her. But that Tuesday wasn't ordinary. There wasn't any warning, no strange sounds, no odd scents in the air, just the usual. Bird song, engine rumble, her backpack swinging as she ran up the school steps. I remember the smell of her hair in the wind, vanilla and wildflowers, and how I pressed my nose to the glass as the truck pulled away, watching until the school disappeared behind us. Ben dropped me off at home like always. Said something about needing to swing by the station for a quick check-in. I watched him go, then settled by the window, waiting. I did that a lot. Just listened, watched, breathed her scent in from the hoodie she'd forgotten to take that morning. That was enough. But something started gnawing at me around noon. I don't know how to explain it. Call it instinct, call it intuition. Call it the part of me that's more than fur and fang. But I felt it. A tightness in my chest. A stillness in the house that didn't belong. Like something important had been knocked loose, and the world was trying not to notice. I went to her room and lay on her bed. I waited. At 3:15, Ben's truck pulled into the driveway fast, faster than usual. He slammed the door harder, too. I heard his boots on the porch and the keys fumbling in the lock, but he was alone. I ran to the door, tail wagging out of habit. He looked down at me, his face pale, his hands shaking. "She wasn't there," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "They said someone else picked her up, said it was me." My ears went up. Ben stumbled back toward the truck, already dialing his phone. The words spilled out like smoke. Missing, mistake, front office, family emergency. But nothing made sense. Not to him, not to me. I followed him outside. He didn't stop me. By 4 o'clock, the sheriff's department had boots in the woods behind the school, drones in the sky, volunteers printing out flyers with her photo. The teachers were crying. The principal kept rubbing his temples like the truth might fall out of his head if he pushed hard enough. They brought in dogs, not like me, sleek, trained, full-blooded canines with crisp vests and handlers who gave sharp commands. I watched them sniff around, paw at the ground, bark at nothing. I tried to help. I picked up her scent, light, sweet, a little like chalk and bubble gum, and started pulling toward the trees. I knew she hadn't just walked off, but they yanked me back. "Get that dog out of the way," someone snapped. "He's not part of the team," another said. "He's a pet." Ben tried to explain. "He's trained, military grade. He knows her better than anyone." But they didn't listen. They had protocols, charts, assignments, orders. I didn't have any of that. I just had her. So when I kept pulling toward the woods, they locked me in the laundry room. That night I howled. I howled until my voice cracked and the windows rattled and the neighbors closed their blinds. I scratched the door. I tore at the floor. I barked so loud the house itself felt like it might split in two. Ben didn't come. Or maybe he did. Maybe he stood outside the door listening. Either way, he didn't open it. And by midnight, the house was silent again. I was curled in the corner, chest heaving, ears twitching at every creak. Then the scent hit me. Not Ellie's. Not Ben's. His. It was faint, clinging to the old wood of the hallway, the dusty corners of Sarah's office, the one room Ben hadn't opened since she died. I stood. My paws were sore, but I moved anyway. I nudged the door. It was locked. I started to scratch, not wild, not loud, just a quiet, steady rhythm. I needed Ben to see, to smell what I smelled, to understand. When he finally opened the door to the laundry room, he didn't yell, didn't scold. He just stared at me. Then he followed me, bottle of whiskey still in his hand, lips tight with something like regret. "What's wrong with you?" he muttered as I pawed at Sarah's door. "What do you think you're doing?" He turned away to take another drink and bumped the table. The bottle fell, shattered on the floor. The sharp scent of alcohol exploded into the room. I backed away, ears pinned, but I didn't break eye contact. He looked at me, really looked. And I know, he saw it then, that whatever this was, it wasn't about barking at shadows or being difficult. This was about her. His phone rang. He answered on the second ring, voice hoarse. "Ben Parker," the voice said. "This is Agent Naomi Fields with the FBI. We found something." He didn't speak. "We recovered Ellie's backpack near Miller's Creek," she continued. "There are signs of a struggle." When Ben turned back toward the front of the house, the door was open. I was gone. I had broken the screen, torn through the yard, nose low to the ground, every nerve in my body tuned to one single frequency. Ellie. She was out there. And I was going to find her if it was the last thing I did. I ran until the stars blurred. My paws tore through brush and mud, down the side of Deer Ridge, where the creek carved through the valley like a scar. The night air was cold, but I barely felt it. I didn't stop to rest, didn't stop to think. The only thing I followed was scent, hers, faint and broken, like smoke trailing from a dying fire. It led me past places I knew, past the picnic grounds and the edge of the trail where kids used to leave wrappers and dropped ice cream, past the logging road where Sarah once knelt to tie Ellie's shoelace, past the pond where we used to sit in the summer, her head resting against my side. Ellie had been here, and she hadn't been alone. But that scent was older now, dulled by weather and time. I needed something newer, something fresh, So I stopped at the tree line near Miller's Creek, lifted my nose, and waited. The wind shifted, and there it was. Metal, oil, the tang of fear and the staleness of a confined space. Her scent, pressed into something like concrete. But there was something else, too. A cologne. Synthetic. Bitter. The same one I remembered from that other night. The one no one talks about. The night Sarah stopped coming home. I growled low in my throat. I knew that smell. I'd never forgotten it. The trail led into the woods again, off the beaten paths, deeper than even the park rangers went. It wasn't long before I found signs of passing. Boot prints in damp earth, snapped twigs, tire tracks half sunk in the clay. Whoever had taken her knew what they were doing. They knew how to hide, but they hadn't counted on me. By dawn, I had pushed deeper than I'd ever gone. My legs ached, my side bled. Every breath came harder than the one before, but I didn't stop. Couldn't. I'd let one Parker woman down already. I wasn't going to let it happen again. That's when I saw it. Just beyond the thicket, half buried beneath dead branches and rotted logs, was a bunker, concrete and rust, covered in vines like it had been sleeping for decades. The air around it was still, like even the birds didn't want to sing there. I crept closer. There were no guards, no cameras, just a single steel door with a small vent pipe near the base. I nosed at the vent, and I smelled her. Sweat, blood, tears, and under it all, hope. I let out the softest sound I could, just a whine, just enough. Ranger. Her voice was hoarse, weak, but it was hers. Ranger? Is that you? I pressed my muzzle against the vent, breathing in her warmth, willing her to feel me there. I knew you'd come, she whispered. She told me everything in those soft, broken words, about the man with the scratchy voice who called her merchandise, about the woman who brought her food, but never looked her in the eyes, about the other kids she heard in the walls, crying when they thought no one could hear. She told me they were moving her that night, said one of the men smelled like the one who hurt her mom. She remembered the scent. So did I. I pulled away from the vent and began circling the bunker, desperate to find a way in. The windows were sealed. The door was bolted. But then I saw it. A second vent, wider, low to the ground, barely large enough for my frame. I didn't hesitate. I clawed at the metal grate until it gave. I squeezed through, my body scraping against the walls, lungs burning with dust and panic. It was dark inside, darker than anything I'd ever known. I moved by memory, by scent, by instinct. Every step forward was another reminder that I was doing this alone, and I was okay with that, because Ellie wasn't. I heard footsteps echoing in the hall beyond the shaft. A voice muttered something about midnight deadlines and Blackwell wants it quiet this time. I didn't know who Blackwell was, but I knew what he wanted. He wanted to erase her. So I crawled faster. I don't remember how I found the room. Maybe it was luck. Maybe it was something else. But when I reached the end of the shaft and dropped down into the shadows, I saw her. Small, shivering, curled up against the far wall of a cinder block cell. Her fingers reached under the door, bloody and shaking. I pressed my nose to them. She whispered my name. I whined back. That was all we had time for. The footsteps were returning. I backed into the shadows. The door creaked open. A man walked in, carrying a tray. "Dinner time, Princess," he said with a smirk, setting the food on the floor. He never saw me coming. I launched from the darkness, teeth sinking into his arm before he could reach for his weapon. He screamed, high and panicked, slamming against the wall as the tray clattered to the ground. I held fast. I didn't let go. Not this time. More voices. More footsteps. The alarm had been raised. Ellie pushed the door open. He hadn't locked it, and scrambled out. "This way," she whispered, tugging at my fur. I remember a storage room with a window. I followed her. She was barefoot. She winced with every step, but didn't stop. We found the room. The window was high, at least 6 feet up, and too narrow for me. But Ellie could fit. She looked at me. "You want me to climb on you?" I crouched, held steady. Let her climb. She pushed open the rusted latch. Cool air rushed in. She squeezed through, dropped into the grass below. I barked once, soft, urgent. "Go," I told her. She hesitated. "They'll catch you," she said. "Ranger, come with me." I didn't move. She cried, reached for me. I barked again, a little louder. This time, she ran, didn't look back. I turned toward the sound of boots in the hall. I wasn't going to make it easy for them. Not after everything. Not with her out there again. Breathing. Free. Not this time. There's a silence that comes after a fight. Not peace. Not quiet. Something heavier. The kind that settles into your bones when you've used up every ounce of strength and the danger hasn't passed, just stepped into another room to reload. That's the silence I felt after Ellie slipped through that window. I stood beneath the frame, staring at the moonlight streaming through it, listening to her footsteps vanish into the grass. She was free, but I wasn't. The hall behind me creaked with movement. Metal boots on cement, voices short and sharp, radios buzzing like angry bees. I turned, ears perked, body low. There were more of them than I expected. One rounded the corner first. Big man, shaved head, heavy breath. He saw me and froze, just for a second. It was enough. I lunged. My body was screaming, every rib bruised, my shoulder on fire from when I'd hit the wall. But I didn't care. I slammed into him, teeth sinking into the padded vest. He dropped, grunting, trying to shake me off. More footsteps thundered down the hallway. I released him and bolted left, down the next corridor. I didn't need to win. I just needed to keep them busy, keep them away from her. The bunker was a maze, tight corridors, metal doors, flickering lights. Every turn led to another corridor, another echo, another decision. I knew I couldn't do this forever. My body was giving out, but my will wasn't. I drew them deeper, barking just enough to be heard, ducking through storage rooms and abandoned stairwells. I made them chase me like a ghost, gave her every minute I could. Then I heard it. The sound of tires on gravel, a car skidding to a stop, and then, "Ellie!" Her name, called out by a voice I knew better than any command. "Ben." I turned toward the sound, limping now, dragging my left leg behind me. I couldn't see the exit, but I could smell the fresh air, the engine heat, the gun oil on Ben's holster. I pushed forward. The door to the outer compound burst open just as he ran through, soaked in rain, eyes wide and wild. "Where is she?" he shouted. Ellie came stumbling out of the trees, barefoot and shivering. "Daddy," she cried. Ben dropped to his knees, arms open. She ran into them and held on like she was afraid he might disappear. Behind him came Agent Fields and 2 other FBI agents, rifles drawn, eyes scanning the tree line. Ellie pointed back toward the woods. "Ranger's still in there. They're going to hurt him." Fields didn't hesitate. "Where exactly?" she asked. Ellie opened her mouth to answer, but another figure stepped from the shadows behind her. Dr. Clara Rowe, still in her vet coat, medical bag slung over her shoulder. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, voice trembling, stepping forward slowly. "You're safe now. Let me check you, okay?" At first, it sounded kind, familiar, but Ellie froze. Her nose wrinkled. "You," she whispered, backing up. "You smell like them." Rose's face paled. "What did you say?" "You wear the same perfume." She stepped back again, pointing. "You're one of them." Fields raised her gun, hands where I can see them. But Clara was faster than anyone expected. Her hand darted into the bag, pulling something out, a syringe. Before she could move an inch closer, I exploded from the tree line. I don't remember the pain. I don't remember the leap. Only the feeling of my body slamming into hers, the syringe flying from her grip, her hitting the ground with a cry. I stood over her, growling low, blood dripping from my mouth, my vision tunneling. I heard the click of handcuffs. Agent Fields wrestled the syringe from the dirt. "Tranquilizer," she said. "Same compound we found in the kids' systems." Rose said nothing. She just looked at me, eyes wide, like she'd never really seen me before. Behind me, Ellie ran to my side. "You came back," she whispered, pressing her face to my chest. I licked her forehead once, gently. Then everything went black. I don't know how long I was out. When I came to, everything smelled like antiseptic and iodine. A white ceiling, beeping machines, the soft hum of fluorescent lights. I couldn't move. Tubes in my leg, bandages around my ribs, oxygen in my nose. Ellie was there, curled up in a blanket on a plastic chair, her fingers wrapped around my paw. Ben sat nearby, hands stained with something that wasn't his blood. He leaned forward when he saw my eyes flutter. "You're okay," he said, voice shaking. "You're gonna be okay." I blinked slowly. The vet, Dr. Patel, came in a few minutes later. "He's critical," she said to Ben, checking my IV. "Internal bleeding, lung bruising. Infection risk is high." Ben asked the question I knew was coming. "Is he gonna make it?" Dr. Patel paused, glanced at me. "If he were any other dog, no." She placed a hand gently on my side. "But he's not just any dog." Ellie stirred, looked up. "He's not dying," she said. "He's hiding." They stared at her. She looked at them, serious as stone. "He plays dead sometimes when he's scared. Mom taught him that." Fields came into the room holding something in a clear plastic bag. My collar. Or what looked like my collar, except now it was thicker, heavier. "We found this in evidence storage," she said. "Something's inside." They sliced it open. Inside was a small waterproof capsule, and inside that, a micro SD card. They stared at it in silence. Sarah had left them more than grief. She'd left them the truth. Ben sat down beside me again, shoulders shaking. "You never gave up," he whispered. "Even when I did." I wanted to tell him that none of this had ever been about giving up. It was about Ellie. It had always been about her. They tell you healing takes time. That it's slow, quiet, marked by small victories, like the first breath without pain, or the first step without trembling. But that's not what it felt like for me. For me, healing was war. It was fighting to keep my eyes open, to stay present, to breathe through the weight in my chest that felt like a mountain pressing down. It was needles and wires, and the sterile hush of machines, humming in rhythm with a heart that wanted to quit. But I didn't, because I could still smell her. Ellie. Even when I couldn't see her, even when everything blurred and faded and pulsed red behind my eyes, her scent was there, soft and stubborn and clinging to the folds of the blanket she slept under beside my recovery crate. She didn't leave, not once. Not when the nurses told her she should, not when Ben tried to carry her out. She just held my paw and whispered stories, little ones I remembered. "Remember the turtle we saw that day near the pond?" she asked once, her voice scratchy from sleep. "You sniffed it and then jumped like it was going to eat you." She giggled, and I wagged my tail. Barely. But it was enough. The doctor said it was a good sign. Agent Fields visited often. She'd stand just outside the glass, always with coffee in one hand and some new piece of news in the other. The SD card from my collar had been everything they hoped it was, and more. Names, bank records, transfers, surveillance files. "Your girl was building a case," she said one afternoon, nodding toward Ben. "Sarah was meticulous, brave." Ben nodded, his face unreadable. "She knew," he said finally. "Knew what she was walking into." Fields paused. She also knew she might not walk back out. Later that evening, she showed him something else. An old hard drive recovered from Sarah's old laptop, hidden inside a hollowed-out law book. Ellie had led them to it. She said Mom told her once that real treasure hides in plain sight, Fields explained. Ben chuckled, the sound brittle. "That sounds like her." Inside the hard drive was footage, interviews Sarah had conducted with whistleblowers, secret recordings of Franklin Blackwell, the so-called philanthropist, whose name now headlined every newspaper in the country. He'd used youth centers to identify vulnerable kids, groomed them, moved them, broke them. And Sarah had known. She'd followed the trail, documented everything, and when it got too dangerous, she embedded parts of the truth where only one creature could find it. Me. Fields leaned in close to me through the glass that night. "You were her vault, weren't you?" she whispered. "Her soldier. Her courier." I blinked, then closed my eyes, but I heard her say it. "Good boy." The media had a field day. Hero K9 cracks national trafficking case. Girl saved by retired military dog. Family's tragedy becomes FBI's breakthrough. I didn't care about the headlines. I only cared about the weight of Ellie's hand resting on my side. But peace, it seemed, was still a little too far out of reach. It happened 3 days after the raid, in the middle of the night. The farmhouse was quiet, wrapped in that deep kind of stillness that feels like the world holding its breath. Ellie was curled against Ben on the couch. I was nearby, still recovering but alert, always alert. I hadn't slept deeply since the day I found her again. At 3:07 a.m., the back window shattered. Glass hit the floor like ice falling from the roof. I was up before Ben was fully awake. My ears were already pinned back, my nose flooded with adrenaline and the scent I hadn't smelled since the bunker. Blackwell. He wasn't dead. He wasn't gone. He was here. I growled, low and deep, a sound that came from the very center of me. Ben grabbed Ellie and rolled off the couch, shielding her behind the armchair. "Stay down," he whispered, his voice tight. I moved to the door. No barking, no warning, just stillness. Footsteps creaked across the wooden porch, slow, deliberate. The front door opened. There he stood, Franklin Blackwell, dry as a bone, smiling like he owned the place. "You've got something that belongs to me," he said. Ben rose, placing himself between Blackwell and Ellie, his arm outstretched. "You're supposed to be in custody." Blackwell shrugged. "Money buys time, influence, silence. Sometimes it even buys freedom." Behind him, someone stepped into view. Clara Rowe, alive, pale, trembling. She clutched her vet bag like it might protect her from what was coming. "You're not taking her," Ben said. Blackwell smirked. "The girl." "Oh, Jack." He always used that name like they were old friends. "I don't want the girl. I want what Sarah left behind. The originals." "You're too late," Ben said. "The FBI has it all." "Not all of it," Blackwell replied. "She made backups, physical ones, and I think you know where they are." "I don't," Ben said. "I think you do." Behind Ben, Ellie peeked out. Blackwell saw her. "You should have kept her hidden," he said, raising his gun. "I didn't wait. I moved so fast I didn't even feel the floor. 1 second I was crouched. The next I was in the air. The gun fired. It didn't matter. I hit him full force, teeth sinking into his wrist as the weapon flew across the room. He slammed back into the wall, grunting. I didn't let go. He punched, kicked. I held. Clara screamed, dropping to her knees, clutching her stomach. Blood stained her hands. She'd been shot in the chaos. Ben dove for the gun, but Blackwell got there first. They fought, 2 men fueled by grief and rage. Punches landed with sickening sounds. I tried to get up again, but something inside me gave way. Everything went sideways. Then Ellie's voice broke through the noise. "Ranger." I turned my head, slowly, saw her running toward me. "Please," she cried, falling beside me. "Please wake up." Ben got the upper hand, slammed Blackwell down, didn't stop hitting him until he stopped moving. The house fell silent, only it wasn't empty. It was filled with something else. Fear, blood, the quiet sobbing of a little girl curled around a dog who had nothing left. Sirens screamed in the distance, but they were too late. I was already fading. Ben knelt beside us. "He's breathing," he said, voice breaking. Barely. Paramedics flooded the house. Agents poured in. Clara was taken. Blackwell was cuffed, but all I saw was Ellie, refusing to let go. "He did good," Ben whispered. "He saved us again." My tail thumped once, then nothing. I don't remember the helicopter ride. Not really. Just bits and pieces, like splinters of a dream that clung to my fur long after the wind stopped howling. The sound of rotor blades thumping above me, the pressure of Ellie's tiny fingers wrapped tight around my paw, the way she whispered over and over, "Hold on, Ranger. Please, please hold on." I tried. God, I tried. But I was slipping. I could feel the weight of the world pressing down, dragging me towards something colder than I'd ever known. Like laying in snow too long. Like silence that didn't care if you came back. Still, I didn't let go. Not yet. We touched down on the roof of Richmond Veterinary Trauma Center just before dawn. The place had been prepped in advance. Sterile rooms cleared, blood units warmed, every surgical vet in the building waiting like soldiers. Dr. Patel was there too. She met us on the pad, already gloved up, eyes scanning every line of the chart like her life depended on it. "He's in shock," she said. "Multiple wounds, severe blood loss, collapsed lung. He shouldn't even be alive." Ellie stood her ground, chin high, eyes fierce. "He's not just a dog," she said. Patel looked at her and nodded. They rushed me inside, hooked me to machines, ran tubes into my legs. I faded in and out, catching only flashes, bright lights, sharp tools, human hands moving fast and steady. I couldn't feel much anymore. Not pain, not breath. But I could hear Ellie's voice outside the operating room door. "You promised, Ranger," she said. "You promised Mom you'd protect us." I held on to that. When it was over, they wheeled me into recovery. I didn't move, didn't stir, but I was there, just beneath the surface. Ellie curled up in a chair next to my crate and wouldn't leave. Not for meals, not for sleep. She kept her hand on the edge of the blanket, just close enough that I could sense her warmth. Ben came in, sat beside her, put a hand on her shoulder. "He's strong," he said. Ellie didn't answer. She just stared at me, then said quietly, "He's not done yet." For days I drifted. I heard voices, Ben's, low and tired, Field's, sharp and focused, Patel's, steady as a river. They talked about arrests, about Clara Rowe recovering in federal medical custody, about Blackwell now behind bars and facing life without parole. But it wasn't over. Not really. Ellie knew. She always knew. One afternoon, as the sun slipped through the blinds and painted gold stripes across the floor, Ellie turned to Ben. "He's looking for something," she said. Ben raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "See his ears?" she whispered. "He keeps flicking them, like he's listening." Ben looked at me. My body barely moved, but my ears had. Ellie smiled faintly. "Mom used to say Ranger could keep secrets," she said. "She said he could find treasure." Ben's breath caught. "Treasure?" He crouched beside me. "Ellie," he said gently, "did your mom ever mention anything about the pond behind the house?" Ellie tilted her head, thinking. "I don't know," she said, "but Ranger would." Ben stood slowly, heart pounding. He called Fields. That evening, they took me home, just for a few hours. Patel loaded me into a rolling gurney, her hand never far from my pulse. Ben drove slow, careful. Ellie rode in the back beside me, whispering promises I didn't fully hear, but felt in my chest like warmth. The pond looked the same as always, still and silent, the surface broken only by a few late-summer dragonflies and the ripple of wind. A wooden bench sagged near the edge, half covered in leaves. But something had changed. I could smell it. Ben wheeled me to the shore. Fields crouched nearby, watching me carefully. "You really sure about this?" she asked. Ben didn't answer. He just looked at me. "Okay, boy," he said, kneeling. "This is the last thing she asked of you. Let's finish it." I didn't hesitate. I stood. It hurt like hell, but I stood. Then I stepped into the water. 1 foot, then another. The cold lapped at my legs, soaking the bandages. Patel cried out, tried to stop me. Ben held her back. "Let him go," he said. "He knows." I swam. Slow, heavy strokes. The center of the pond was deeper than it looked, murky, clouded with years of fallen leaves and secrets. But I knew. I dove, came up coughing, gasping, dragging something with me, a waterproof case, heavy with mud and rust. Ben waded out, caught it in his hands. I turned, dove again. By the time I was done, I had dragged out 5 cases, each one packed with papers, photographs, flash drives. Sarah's handwriting on every label, her voice, preserved in files, her story, sealed beneath the water she used to call her thinking place. Fields called in the forensic team immediately. "This is it," she said, flipping through one of the folders. "This connects Blackwell to everything. Offshore accounts, property deals, travel manifests." Ben knelt beside me as I crawled back to shore, too exhausted to lift my head. "You did it," he whispered, hand resting on my soaked fur. "You really did it." That night, back at the safe house, Ellie pulled a blanket over me and curled up beside me again. She whispered something I hadn't heard since Sarah was alive. "Good night, treasure hunter," she said. "Sleep now." And this time, I did. There's a funny thing about smell. Most folks don't realize how much it says. To humans, it's background. Coffee brewing, grass after rain, someone's shampoo. But to me, scent is everything. It's history, emotion, truth, and it never lies. That's how I knew it wasn't over. Even after the pond. Even after Sarah's boxes were hauled off by federal agents in gloves and windbreakers. Even after newspapers called her a hero and me a miracle. Because that smell, his smell, was still with me. The chemical sweetness of expensive cologne. Too sharp, too clean, like it was hiding something underneath. I'd first smelled it the night Sarah died. Then again in the bunker, clinging to the walls like mold. I'd followed it through the vents. And when Ellie had whispered, "He smells like the man who hurt my mom," I'd known exactly who she meant. Franklin Blackwell. It was all over him. In the folds of his suit, in the crease of his cuff, in the blood that clung to his wrist after I bit him. It was the same scent that haunted our home before anyone knew it should. And it was still here, lingering. I could feel it in my bones. Agent Fields didn't need convincing. She moved fast. Raids on facilities, interviews with survivors, satellite pings, and asset freezes. Blackwell had built a web across half the country. Youth camps, counseling centers, reform homes, tucked in remote places no one visited twice. He used charm like a scalpel. Carved his way into communities, into families. But Sarah had known. She'd started following the thread years ago. That was the part Ben hadn't known. Maybe the part she hadn't dared say out loud. Not after what happened to other whistleblowers. Sarah wasn't reckless. She was methodical, smart, brave. She just ran out of time. That morning, Agent Fields brought in something new. A letter. Ben held it like it might crumble in his hands. On the front, in looping cursive, it read, "For Jack." He didn't speak as he opened it. Didn't blink much either. Just read, quietly, line by line. I watched him from my blanket. Ellie sat beside me, chewing the sleeve of her hoodie like she used to when she was little and scared. When Ben finally looked up, his eyes were red. "She trained you," he said. I blinked. "She wrote it down. Everything. Said if anything ever happened, you'd know what to do." He turned to Ellie. "She left it all for us. The maps. The passwords. Even the instructions to hide things in the pond." Ellie tilted her head. "Like a treasure hunt." Ben smiled through the ache. "Exactly like that." I watched them both, their grief no longer raw, just tender. Like a bruise that would always hurt if pressed too hard, but still healing. We had a few quiet days after that. The farmhouse started to feel like a home again. The broken window got patched. The blood cleaned off the porch. Flowers showed up at our doorstep. Thank yous from neighbors we barely knew. Cards, stuffed animals, even a new collar with my name stitched in gold. I didn't care much for gifts, but I liked watching Ellie laugh again. She chased fireflies one night, barefoot in the yard, her giggles floating in the dark like music. Ben sat on the steps, a mug of black coffee in his hands. I lay beside him, breathing in the cool grass and the warmth of his presence. "She's going to be okay," he said, more to himself than to me. I huffed quietly. Agreed. But then the call came, late. I heard it in Field's voice when she showed up at the house, even before she said the words. He made contact. Ben froze. "What?" "Blackwell, through a burner phone. He wants to make a deal." "Deal?" "Evidence," she said. "He thinks we only found partials. He's asking for a trade." Ben's jaw clenched. "Ellie?" Fields nodded. "He said she's leverage, said he has people who can still reach her. He wants the originals in exchange for her safety." "But we already turned everything in." "He doesn't know that." Ben stared out the window for a long time. "I'll do it," he said. Fields raised a hand. "We'll be there. The whole team. He won't see us." "Doesn't matter," Ben replied. "He's not walking out of this." The meeting was set for the next night, an abandoned barn on the edge of a tobacco field, just past the county line. Ben was wired. Fields had agents in place, perimeter teams, snipers in the rafters, drones overhead. Blackwell showed up on time. Same suit, same smug smile. "You look tired," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. Ben didn't answer. "Do you have what I asked for?" Blackwell asked. Ben held up a briefcase. "Where's my daughter?" he asked. Blackwell grinned. That's when the lasers lit up the barn, dozens of red dots slicing through the dark. "Drop your weapon," a voice boomed. Blackwell froze. Seconds later, Fields stepped from the shadows. "End of the line, Franklin." He laughed. But he didn't resist. Back at the house, Ellie was asleep on the couch. I curled up beside her. Ben came in just before sunrise, mud on his boots, his hands shaking. He didn't say a word, just sat beside us, placed his palm on my head, and whispered, "You brought us home, buddy." I didn't move, didn't need to. I already knew. They buried Sarah on a warm day. I remember the way the sunlight flickered through the trees, falling in long ribbons across the grass. There weren't many people there, just a handful, neighbors, old friends, maybe a few reporters in dark sunglasses who tried not to look like they were watching. But it wasn't about them. It was about Ellie. She stood at the headstone holding a small bouquet of wild daisies, the same kind Sarah used to tuck behind her ear when she worked in the garden. Her hand trembled. She didn't cry, not right away. She just looked at the carved letters, lips pressed tight, like she was waiting to hear Sarah's voice one more time before the dirt settled. Ben stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, the other clutching a folded piece of paper, a letter Sarah had written to him. And to me. He didn't read it out loud, not all of it, just the last part. "She said we'd be okay," he whispered. "Said she believed in us, even when we didn't believe in ourselves." Ellie glanced at me. "She told me Ranger could find anything," she said, "even when I couldn't." And then finally, she cried. Later that night, back at the house, the three of us sat on the porch. The air smelled like pine and old wood and something new, something like peace. Not the kind that comes easy, the kind you earn. Field stopped by just before sunset. She wasn't in her FBI gear, just jeans and a denim jacket, her badge clipped to her back pocket like an afterthought. She brought donuts, glazed, the kind Ellie liked. She crouched beside me, scratched gently behind my ears. "You did good, partner," she said. I wagged my tail once. That was all I could give. She turned to Ben. We've got enough to put Blackwell away for good. Life. No parole. Ben nodded. He won't touch her again. No, Fields agreed. He won't. But she didn't leave right away. Instead, she handed Ben a small wooden box. This was under Hunter's bed, she said. The FBI team found it when we cleared the house. It was old, smooth from years of wear. The lid had Sarah's handwriting carved into it. For Jack. Ben opened it slowly. Inside was another letter and a voice recorder. He looked at me first, then pressed play. Her voice filled the porch like a whisper on wind. Jack, if you're hearing this, something's happened to me. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you everything. I wanted to. I thought I had more time. But if I didn't make it home, you needed to know. Her words poured out. Truths she'd hidden. Trails she'd followed. Warnings she hadn't had the heart to say face to face. She told him she trained me for this. Not just as protection, not just as a guardian, but as a compass. To bring them home. To lead them back to each other. To Ellie, she said, in that soft, sure tone that never trembled. I want you to know how proud I am of you. You're braver than most grown-ups I've met. You feel everything so deeply, and that's not a weakness. That's your gift. Hold on to that. Ben sat very still. When the recording ended, no one spoke. Then Ellie leaned into his side and said, She didn't leave us. She just left a map. And just like that, I knew we'd made it to the other side of something. The next few weeks passed like slow rain, gentle, healing. I started walking again, not far at first, just from the couch to the porch, then to the edge of the yard. Ellie walked beside me every time, hand resting on my back like a shadow that refused to leave. Dr. Patel said I was healing faster than expected. Strong heart, she said. Strong will, too. Ben fixed up the old swing on the porch, painted the front door blue again. Let Ellie help plant wildflowers under the windows. Laughter came back to the house, not all at once, not loudly, but in pieces. And then, one afternoon, Ellie brought out her school journal. I've been writing it all down, she said, so other kids know they're not alone. She opened to the first page. Her handwriting was careful, each letter shaped with focus. My name is Ellie Parker. I was taken, but I was never truly lost, because someone always believed in me, because a dog named Ranger never stopped looking, and because my mom left behind a map. She closed the journal gently. This is our story. Ben wrapped his arm around her shoulders. I lay at their feet, eyes half closed, content, not because the world was perfect, but because it was ours again. We had survived the worst, and we had each other. Sometimes treasure isn't gold or glitter or secrets buried deep. Sometimes it's a home rebuilt, a promise kept, a child safe, and the quiet knowledge that when everything else fell apart, we still found our way back, together. The days grew quiet. Not the kind of quiet that means something's wrong, but the kind that wraps around you like an old quilt, warm, worn, familiar. The hum of the porch swing, the sound of Ellie humming to herself as she fed the chickens, Ben reading the paper on the steps with a mug of black coffee cooling beside him. I slept a lot. Not because I was weak, but because for the first time in a long while, I didn't have to stand guard through the night. No more pacing hallways. No more ears twitching at every creak. We were safe. That's what we believed. But safety has a way of making people slow. And men like Franklin Blackwell, they don't slow. It happened just after midnight. The wind had picked up, rustling the trees in long sighs. Rain had started to fall, Not heavy, just enough to tap gently on the windows like fingers asking to come inside. Ellie was asleep on the couch, curled under a knitted blanket, one foot sticking out the side like it always did. Ben had dozed off in the armchair, his glasses still perched on his nose, the book he'd been reading slipping to the floor. I lay on my old blanket, not far from them, eyes closed, but not asleep. I'd learned to rest without surrendering. That's how I heard it. The click of the back lock. Soft, subtle, meant to go unnoticed. My ears snapped up. I didn't move right away. Just listened. The rain, the wind. And then, footsteps. Too slow, too careful. Wrong. I growled, low and deep. Ben stirred. "Ranger?" he mumbled. I rose to my feet. The air changed. Then, glass shattered from the kitchen. Ben shot up, already reaching for Ellie. She startled, but didn't scream. I'd trained her well. "Stay behind me," he whispered, ushering her behind the couch. He looked at me. I looked back. Then the front door creaked open. And there he stood, Franklin Blackwell, alive, smiling, like he'd just come to borrow sugar. "You've got something that belongs to me," he said, stepping inside. Ben raised a hand. "You're supposed to be locked up." Blackwell chuckled. "Money buys many things, Jack. Time, influence, silence. Sometimes it buys freedom." Behind him, someone else appeared, Clara Rowe. She looked different, smaller somehow, gaunt, pale. Her coat was soaked through, her eyes wide and wild. She clutched that worn vet bag like it still held something that could save her. "I don't want the girl," Blackwell continued, stepping forward. "I want what Sarah left behind." Ben didn't move. "You're too late," he said. "The FBI has everything." "Not everything," Blackwell snapped, the smile slipping. "She kept backups, physical ones, and I think you know where they are." Ben stayed quiet. "I don't." Blackwell glanced around the room. Then, his eyes landed on Ellie. "You should have kept her hidden." He raised the gun. I didn't wait. There wasn't time. I leapt. My body screamed in protest. Old wounds tearing again. But I didn't care. All I saw was Ellie. The flash of the muzzle came mid-air. I heard the crack before I felt the fire rip through my side. But I didn't stop. I slammed into him, teeth finding flesh, dragging him down. We crashed into the table, splinters flying. He roared, the gun skidding across the floor. I held on, jaws locked around his wrist. Blood filled my mouth. He punched me, twice, 3 times. My vision blurred. Then Ben was there, diving for the gun. But Blackwell rolled, knocked him off balance. They grappled on the floor, grunting, swinging wild. Years of rage in every hit. I tried to rise, but my leg buckled. Then Clara screamed. She dropped to her knees, hands on her stomach, blood soaking through her fingers. Another shot, too close to tell whose. Ellie cried out. I forced myself up, dragged myself back toward the fight. Ben had Blackwell pinned now, was hitting him again and again, knuckles cracking, breath ragged, until Blackwell stopped moving. Ellie ran to my side. I collapsed. She knelt beside me, tears falling fast. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't go." Ben crawled over. "He's breathing," he said. "Barely." Sirens wailed in the distance, closer now, but not fast enough. Everything was too bright. then too dark. I heard her voice one last time before it all went quiet. "You did good, Ranger." And for the first time in a long while, I let go. Darkness isn't always black. Sometimes it's gray, thick, quiet. The kind that holds you still and makes time feel slow, like the world forgot to keep spinning. That's where I was, floating in it. I couldn't feel my legs, couldn't hear Ellie, but I knew she was close, knew she was crying. I could smell the salt of it in the air, could sense her heart hammering beside mine like a hummingbird beating against a window pane. Everything in me wanted to wake, but I'd learned this trick a long time ago, back when loud noises meant I had to go still, back when playing dead wasn't a joke, but a lesson, one Sarah taught me herself. "Sometimes, Ranger," she used to say, brushing dirt from my coat, "you don't win by fighting. Sometimes you survive by waiting." So I waited. Sirens came. Boots on the floor. Voices shouting. Someone said, "Medevac." Another cursed under their breath. Someone else, Ben, sounded like he was trying to hold the world together with just his hands. "Hang on, buddy. Please." But it was Ellie's voice that brought me back. "He's not dying," she told them. "He's hiding." There was silence then, like a room full of grown-ups trying to figure out what to do when a child knows something they don't. "She's right," Ben said. "He's done it before." I felt myself being lifted, strapped to something, wheels rolling. Rain hit my face as they carried me outside. Then the sound of rotor blades, then sky. The helicopter was cold. The wind cut through the seams in the fuselage. But Ellie held my paw the entire time. Her voice was steady. No sobbing now. "You promised Mom you'd protect us," she said, close to my ear. "And you did." Her breath hitched. "So now, I'm gonna protect you." I wanted to answer, to lift my head, lick her cheek, anything. But I couldn't. Not yet. When we landed, the trauma team was waiting. This wasn't the first time they'd seen me. Dr. Patel led the charge. She didn't ask questions, just barked orders. Blood, fluids, oxygen, round-the-clock monitoring. "He's critical," she told Ben. "But if any dog's going to make it through this, it's him." The hours blurred. I drifted in and out. Machines beeped. Lights blinked. But there were hands, gentle ones, always working. Ellie sat in the same chair beside me she'd used before, bundled in an old army jacket Ben had kept from his firehouse days. I remember one moment clearer than the others. Her hand on my paw. Her voice, barely more than a breath. "I'm here." That was all. Just those 2 words. And for the first time since the gun went off, I wanted to fight again. The second surgery came the next morning. They repaired what they could. Torn muscle, a punctured lung, internal bleeding. It was worse than they thought. "Doctor?" Patel came out after 6 hours, face lined with exhaustion. "He's alive," she said, "but the next 24 hours are everything." Ben nodded. He didn't speak much those days, just sat beside Ellie, one hand on her back, the other holding the edge of my blanket like it might anchor him to the earth. That night, something changed. I woke, not fully, but enough. Enough to see Ellie curled beside me, fast asleep. Enough to hear Ben whisper, "You stubborn old mutt," and enough to lift my head. Just a little. Ellie stirred. "Ranger?" I blinked once. She reached for me, slow and careful, brushing the fur near my ears. "Hi," she whispered. I let out a low huff. Soft, not quite a bark, but it was mine. She smiled so big, I thought her face might break. "He's awake," she called, bolting up. Dr. Patel rushed in. Nurses behind her. Lights flicked on. Machines blinked. But all I cared about was the hand in my fur. The warmth of it. The truth of it. Ellie leaned close. "I told them," she said. "I told them you weren't gone." Later that night, Ben sat beside my crate, staring out the hospital window. "I used to think you were just a dog," he said quietly. "A good one. Loyal, but still just a dog." He looked at me. "You were more than that." He pulled something from his pocket, a flash drive. "Sarah left this. Said you'd know what to do with it. You did." His voice cracked. "I didn't." I watched him. Waited. "But I'm going to do better," he said. "For her. For Ellie. For you." He stood up slowly, then looked down at me one last time. "Rest easy, partner." And for the first time in a long time, I did. Not because I was weak, but because I was finally safe. We all were. The first time I walked without help again, the whole room froze. It was early morning at the trauma center, the kind of quiet you only get right before dawn, when the night shift nurses are swapping stories and the machines hum in a lullaby rhythm. Ellie was sitting on the floor, cross-legged, scribbling in her notebook. Ben had nodded off in the recliner with his arms slung over his eyes. I stood up, not a wobble, not a stagger, just stood. Ellie looked up and gasped. Her pencil fell from her hand. "Ranger?" I took one step, then another. She scrambled to her feet, nearly tripping over herself. "You're doing it," she whispered. "Good boy." Ben stirred, blinked at me, and then just laughed, a sound I hadn't heard from him in a long time. Not a chuckle, not a soft exhale, a real laugh, full and warm and surprised. "You stubborn miracle," he said, walking over and kneeling in front of me. "You just don't know how to quit, do you?" I wagged my tail. We went home a week later. The farmhouse looked different, not just the paint on the front porch or the sunflowers blooming along the fence. It felt different, lighter, like someone had opened every window and let all the ghosts drift out with the wind. Sarah's old office had been cleaned out, not erased, just honored. Her framed articles now hung on the hallway wall. Her picture, laughing, holding baby Ellie in one arm and a notepad in the other, sat above the mantel. The bottle of whiskey that used to live in the bottom drawer was gone, replaced by a stack of Ellie's drawings. Most of them were of me. She drew me as a superhero once, cape and all. I didn't mind. She even gave me a sidekick, a goofy big-eared mutt named Cody, a real dog we'd just adopted from the shelter. Young, wild, no manners, no clue when to sit or stay. But sweet as pie. I tolerated him, even let him curl up next to me when the nights got too cold. We were a pack again. One morning, snow dusted the back porch. Ellie stood at the window, cocoa in hand, watching the flurries fall. I sat beside her, tail gently thumping. "Thinking?" Ben asked, handing her a marshmallow. She nodded. "Just remembering." "Anything in particular?" Ellie turned to look at him. "Do you think Mom knew she was going to die?" Ben was quiet for a while. "I think she knew the danger," he said, "but she hoped she'd stop it in time." Ellie nodded slowly. "She didn't just leave evidence," she said. "She left instructions." Ben smiled. "She trusted Ranger more than anyone." "Even more than you?" He laughed. "Definitely more than me." Later that week, Agent Fields stopped by. She looked softer now. Civilian clothes, hair down. She brought a pie and some news. "The last of Blackwell's network has been shut down," she said. Dozens of arrests across state lines. Safe houses opened. Kids rescued. All because of what Sarah left behind. She glanced at me. And what he carried through. Ellie opened her storybook for her. Handwritten pages, colored tabs, a cover that read, "How My Dog Saved the World." Fields smiled. "You ever think about publishing this?" "I already did," Ellie said proudly. "Mrs. Gilmore from school printed copies for the library." Ben raised a brow. "You didn't tell me that." She shrugged. "It was a surprise." That Sunday, we went to the cemetery. Just the three of us. Ben laid a bouquet of lilies on Sarah's grave. Ellie tucked a worn photo beside the headstone, one of the three of us sitting on the porch swing, Cody peeking out behind my tail. Then she whispered, "Hi, Mom." No tears, just peace. "She always said love doesn't die," Ellie told Ben. "It just changes shape." Back at home, we had our own little celebration. Cupcakes, pictures, laughter, lots of laughter. Even Cody got a tiny party hat. Then came my retirement. The Maplewood Firehouse opened its doors to neighbors, friends, agents, and a handful of strangers who'd followed our story through the news. Ellie stood tall at the front of the room, holding my leash. I wore a new vest, dark blue, with gold embroidery that read, "Retired. Still a hero." Ben spoke at the podium. "I'm not a man of many speeches," he began, clearing his throat. "But I've learned a lot in the past year about love, about second chances, and about what it means when someone, or something, refuses to give up on you." He looked at me. Ranger didn't just save Ellie. He saved me. He brought us back. Then he knelt beside me, pulled out a small wooden box, and clipped a new tag to my collar. The words shimmered in the light. "Always faithful. Forever family." The crowd stood. Applause rolled like thunder. I didn't bark. I just leaned into Ben's chest and closed my eyes. After the party, we sat on the porch swing under a sky filled with stars. Ellie rested her head on my side. Ben sat beside her, fingers laced with hers. "Do you think Ranger knows he's a hero?" she asked. Ben smiled. "I think he knows he's loved." That was enough for me. So if you ask me who I am, if I'm just a dog or a soldier or something in between, I'll tell you this. I'm Ranger. I'm not just a dog. I'm family. And I found my way home. Before we say goodbye, I just want to thank you for listening. You didn't have to stay with me through this story, but you did, and that means more than you know. If any part of my journey reminded you of something you've lived through, or someone you've loved and lost, just type 1 in the comments. That's it. No big speech. Just a quiet way of saying, I understand. Because sometimes the hardest parts of life aren't meant to be carried alone. And if you'd like to walk with me a little farther, if you want to hear more about what came after, or the others like me out there still searching, still serving, go ahead and hit subscribe. Not because you're supposed to, but because maybe, just maybe, you believe in stories like mine. I'm Ranger, and I'm still here, still listening, still ready. Until next time.